Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Bartlett, I'm going to pick up where we left off, and that is the issue of reliance on Horizon data. I want to go back in time slightly, and if we could begin with Bayes 0000789. These are notes from a meeting that you weren't present at, but I think it does set a scene. This is the Post Office quarterly shareholder meeting on the 10th of January 2023. If we scroll down, we can see who was present. And please, could we turn to page 4? There's discussion there of what to do in respect of losses. And I'd like to take you to the third bullet point. It says, AC, I think that's Mr. Cameron, mentioned they are seeing a rapid increase in losses, including shortfalls of cash and branches. The Post Office need to conduct a proper investigation and demonstrate whether the postmasters are accountable. However, it's difficult to conduct a proper investigation based on the Horizon data, and also the Post Office are not in a position to ask for the relevant money back in the current climate. It was noted as not a good time to prosecute postmasters due to the current historical cases, but this is seeing a rapid rise in losses for the Post Office. MR's team are working on putting a new system in place. Was that a feeling that you shared as at January 2023?
No, I was not aware of that.
No. How about at the present time? Are there, for example, a rapid rise in losses for the Post?
I don't know.
If we look down, it says AC raised that there are other solutions rather than going to the police. If postmasters are responsible and don't pay the money back, there is an option to take it off their remuneration. Any solutions as to how any shortfalls that postmasters are accountable for can be recouped from postmasters, aside from remuneration, were noted as preferable. The Post Office, in cases where there is fraud, these can be tested in a civil jurisdiction. A paper on this was noted as being worked on currently and would be raised to the government in due course. Are you aware of that paper having been developed at all?
I think that might have been the paper or the work that I referred to earlier today. But I'm not sure about the timing, but I think it might be.
And has that work been completed?
Yes, and I think that's led to there's no decision at the moment. And I think, as Mel Park said yesterday, it's still being considered.
Thank you. If we scroll down, it says there, Post Office noted that where full investigations are done, quite often the Post Office does get the repayment. The issue is that the investigation has to be good enough and that it is independent. However, the problem is that data is not sufficient to do an investigation in many cases. Mr. Reid noted that ultimately those who steal from the Post Office will be prosecuted. The concerns about the data not being sufficient for an investigation, as at January 2023, are you aware that that was a concern within the organisation?
So I think at about that time there were concerns not over Horizon data but over stamp stock dispatch data. And I know Al Cameron was close to those issues, but this does seem to say it relates to cash shortfalls. And no, I wasn't aware of that.
If we turn, please, to poll 00423698. Around this time, 24th of January, we have an email from Mr. Cameron to Nick Reid. It's not an email that you were copied into at the time, but he says, my view on losses, which I think you would know, but from a cultural point of view, we cannot start trying to take money off postmasters until we have demonstrated HIJ, I think that's Horizon Issues Judgment, / data. And then he sets out various things that need to take place. But as you said, your understanding at this time, you didn't have understanding of these issues at this time?
No.
Can we please turn to poll 00448 362? This is a loss recovery update. We have metadata that suggests it's from February 2024. It does refer to your team in its current form. Are you able to assist us with when this might have been produced?
No, I think the first time I saw this was when it was raised with other witnesses in the last week or two.
If we turn to page 3, there's the background section there, and this you may have seen raised with other witnesses. Following the recommendations made in the group litigation order and common issues judgment, the Post Office ceased action to recover established losses from postmasters. This activity has been on hold since this time, except where the postmaster both agrees to repay the established losses and proceeds to repay. To support implementation of associated common issues recommendations, a new team and target operating model was set up. The process to review a discrepancy and identify the cause is formally documented and regularly assured by the Assurance and Complex Investigation team. So that's your team.
Yes.
And that's an accurate statement.
Yes, it is.
This includes looking at Horizon transaction data to ensure Horizon acted as expected and is therefore unlikely to be the cause of a discrepancy. Just pausing there, I think we addressed this previously, but they're looking at Horizon transaction data. Can you assist us with what that involves?
So the safeguard side of this are the actions taken within the retail teams, which is what bugs, errors, defects had been reported that could be relevant to that branch at the relevant time and the relevant transaction type. They look at training issues, they look at calls into what is effectively Tier 1, the call centre, and then they look all the way through. So I think that's what that means.
There are a number of possible outcomes. Write-off as below de minimis value, write-off as the cause has not been established, correct with a transaction correction if the cause was due to a processing error, establish that the loss has arisen on the balance of probabilities due to negligence, carelessness or error of the postmaster and or their assistants. In the last case above, the postmaster is asked to contact the postmaster account support team to arrange repayment. If the postmaster disagrees with the findings, they're able to refer them to an internal dispute process. Current repayment for discrepancies is only sought from a postmaster voluntarily. And then it's 7 really that I'd like to look at. Whilst the current discrepancy review process does involve checks in Horizon, the target operating model and ultimately any recovery activity is predicated on Horizon data being robust and for the Post Office to be able to rely on this data. The Post Office is currently awaiting confirmation from both Fujitsu and the Post Office IT that this is the case. Now, if that metadata is right, if this was February 2024, are you aware since then of confirmation being provided by Fujitsu and the Post Office IT team that that is the case?
So the letters that have been brought up at the inquiry over the last few weeks from Fujitsu, between Fujitsu and Pol,
yes.
I think the final sort of letters on there show that although Fujitsu do not want Pol to use Horizon data for this sort of activity, they did not say it was unreliable. In fact, they said that the data could be used for appeals, and it could be used for the calculation of compensation for postmasters. So I think that has been taken as a confirmation that the data is correct, because Fujitsu would not, I am sure, want that data to be used in a Court of Appeal case if it's not accurate.
So your reading of all the correspondence, and we'll get to some of it, between Post Office and Fujitsu is in effect confirmation from Fujitsu that the Horizon data is reliable.
Yes, and also, if I may say, is that there must be a duty on Fujitsu to declare if they think it is unreliable. and they haven't as far as I'm aware.
Could we please turn to FUJ 00243203? And this is, I think, the beginning of a dispute between yourselves and Fujitsu. It may have a longer history than that, but I'm just going to take you to this particular document, which relates to supporting a City of London police investigation. That's the 19th of April, and it's an email from yourself to Daniel Walton. Who's Daniel Walton?
I believe he's the relationship manager at Fujitsu.
Thank you. We've seen this email before, but I will read from it because it's quite an important document in the context of this dispute. One of my team has gone back to City of London Police to see how the contact you referenced below was progressing, as we have an open and objective engagement with City of London Police on this matter. City of London Police has informed us that they have not had any additional information nor contact with Fujitsu after the single exploratory and inconclusive conversation. They left that conversation with the feeling that they were indirectly being told that the Horizon system was unreliable, and so the case could not progress. We need to explore this, as this is not the nuanced impression Simon Oldnall has given me. As the potential victim in this case, the Post Office would be grateful if you could provide me with contact details for either the equivalent person in Fujitsu to my role or appropriate person in your UK legal team. I'll then pass on those details on to the City of London Police, who are looking to have a trilateral conversation with Fujitsu, Post Office and City of London Police. Just pausing there, do you think it is appropriate for the Post Office, who could in some senses be described as the victim, and we'll get to whether the victim is the right word or not, do you think it is right for the Post Office to be contacting Fujitsu in respect of the City of London Police investigation?
Yes.
And why do you say that?
Because the feedback that we were provided from City London Police showed that there was some confusion as to what was wanted and what was needed. And I felt that if I could speak to another investigator within the Fujitsu organisation, that they would understand the evidential needs of City London Police and therefore be able to better help the City London Police.
And why, in your view, was it appropriate for the Post Office to do that conversation rather than, for example, the City of London Police directly?
Because it was agreed with City London Police that we would do that.
The next paragraph says, "It is impossible to overstate how important this is. I need to advise both the police and the Post Office as to the evidentially established reliability or not of data that is being used every day in establishing outcomes with postmasters and potentially to be presented to the criminal justice system by the police in the three public prosecuting agencies. The non-provision of relevant witness statements from the Post Office and Fujitsu will rightly be interpreted by the police and prosecutors as the Post Office and Fujitsu not having faith in the reliability of the data with obvious outcome resulting." What do you mean by with the obvious outcome resulting?
So two different things. One is the immediacy for that investigation, which would be closed, which, just to be clear, we would agree with. We're not trying to push through that case to conclusion. We want the we want the evidence to be tested by the police. And then the broader outcome is if Fujitsu provided a witness statement to the City London Police that looked at the individual transactions and whether at that time, date, and that branch, with those particular transactions, that evidence was that those transactions were not necessarily reliable, that would mean something would need to be done in terms of looking into whether it's a systemic issue or just relating to that branch. But by failing to provide any witness statement, which was what the impression we were being given at that stage, means that doubt should be brought into the reliability of the whole system. And so the outcome would be that we would be recommending that urgently the post office looks at whether we should continue to be using Horizon and to calculate payments to postmasters, to whether our annual report and accounts should be signed off. It's a significant issue.
The obvious outcome resulting, though, I mean, one reading of that sentence is what you're saying there is that without it, the police are obviously going to drop the case.
That is one outcome, yes.
I mean, that's the obvious outcome, isn't it?
It is one of the obvious outcomes, yes.
Did you mean for that to imply several obvious outcomes?
Yes.
Did this come as a surprise to you?
Yes, it did.
I mean, we saw that discussion from a year earlier, concerns within the business. Why do you think it is that those concerns hadn't reached you and your department?
I'm not sure.
Could we please turn to FUJ 002439192?
Sorry, Mr. Bates, just before we go on to this,
Absolutely.
Can I help a bit further? I think we will probably have material from that period in time that was contemporaneously made that will show that we were thinking about the wider impacts of this. It may not be reflected with clarity in my email that you've just shown, but I believe we have material that might be able to demonstrate we were thinking about the wider impact.
Sorry, what do you mean by that? Do you mean the focus on the final few words?
The outcomes, yes.
So I think your evidence is that you could have articulated it better, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Looking at this letter, this is a letter from yourself to the Lancashire Constabulary. Could we perhaps bring up onto screen your second witness statement, which is WITN 111902000. And as the chair's highlighted, there is a annex to your witness statement that includes a list of different cases. It's at the back of your statement, and I'll just take you, please, to page 105. So this is where it begins. And could we please turn to 118? There's a reference there to Lancashire Police, a case of 14th of September 2022, money laundering and theft. Is that the same case as we see this letter
Yes.
relating to? Thank you. So I'll just read for background that section that says the branch, which was run by an officer in charge, not the postmaster, was initially flagged by the cash centre due to an increase in cash remittance return amounts to the cash centre. It was also highlighted by the MoneyGram compliance team that they wanted to complete a compliance call with the branch to a large number of high-value transactions being completed to the same destination. At this point, the financial crime team was involved and highlighted circa, is that 3.3 million
Yes.
pounds worth of MoneyGram mobile send transactions processed at the branch. The financial crime team contacted the branch on requesting more information regarding these transactions. On the same day, the financial crime team was contacted by the area manager, who advised that the postmaster was in touch with them and advised of a possible shortfall of £400,000, which was related to the MoneyGram transactions. The CIU was advised of the situation and tasked with completing an investigation into this matter. Police have interviewed the officer, the OIC, that's the person in charge of the post office.
Yes, sorry, yes.
And restrained circa £500,000. Inquiries indicated by Horizon was a shortage of £398,000, which, if proved, would be a loss to the post office. So it's a case involving nearly £400,000 of potential loss to the post office.
Correct.
Police worked on a basis that the OIC creamed off this amount from the cash transferred through MoneyGram. Customers considered money laundering suspect and OIC suspected for potential conspiracy regarding money laundering and theft of circa £398,000 from the post office. Could we, if we return please to page 118, we see on the second from right column, police requested statement regarding robustness of Horizon, post office producing a statement and also referred police to Fujitsu. Has the post office produced a statement relating to the robustness of Horizon?
That is in train, and it is to be delivered by the end of next month to Lancashire Police.
If we go back to the letter, please, it's FUJ 002439192. It looks as though, as at the 25th of April of this year, the police had taken no further action in respect of this case. Is that correct?
No, they'd submitted an advice file to the Crown Prosecution Service, and the Crown Prosecution Service came back to them in relation to the money laundering and the theft case matters, that they wanted some, effectively a corroborative witness statement from Horizon to support other evidence that the police had.
And when you say from Horizon, from who? From the post office or from Fujitsu?
CPS, I don't think specified, but I'm not sure. But in effect, the best evidence is held by Fujitsu as opposed to post office, which is why we referred Lancashire Police to Fujitsu.
I'm just going to read to you from this letter. If we scroll down slightly, it says, Post Office Legal have reviewed... just pausing there. Did you draft this letter?
I stitched it together. The majority of the stuff, of the text in there in relation to Justice Fraser's comments are from the criminal lawyer within house.
That's Mr. Lill.
Lill, yeah.
Post Office Legal have reviewed the reasoning for not progressing to a charging decision. It is not for the Post Office to influence the independence of the investigation or the assessment of evidence in any case. However, the reasoning around the credibility of the Horizon system seems to be a significant factor, if not the central factor, in the reason for not progressing this investigation further, and that reasoning appears to be based on a misinterpretation of the findings of courts. The Post Office have been asked to address 3 questions in respect of the decision to no further action in this matter. So had a decision to no further action the matter taken place by this stage, or was that something that was just in contemplation?
I'm not sure at this stage.
Post Office hopes that the information provided below in respect of these questions is sufficient to assist with a review of that decision. The questions posed are: A, the new Horizon system is much more reliable than the old system. B, evidence that a court has ruled so. C, that the new system was installed and in place in that particular post office. If we scroll down, C is answered first, and you say we can confirm that that branch was operating the HNGA version of Horizon. And then you address questions A and B. And you say the Horizon Issues judgment is the judgment of Mr. Justice Fraser, where, in short, he found there to be numerous bugs, errors and defects affecting the Horizon system that were capable of generating unexplained shortfalls in branch accounts. In the Horizon Issues judgment, Fraser J. made clear that it was important to distinguish between the versions of the system in use from 2000 to 2018 and the HNGA system being used thereafter. And you set out various sections of the judgment. So there, the first section, Mr. Justice Fraser says, for example, it is agreed by the experts that the Horizon system in its HNGA form is now relatively robust. And over the page, another section on robustness where he says, that the experts are agreed that it is far more robust than Horizon in earlier times. A further section where Mr. Justice Fraser says there are only isolated instances of it happening in respect of HNGA, which the experts agree is a better system than either of the other two iterations of Horizon. And if we scroll down, please. Again, I found the system as it is in 2019 is far more robust than it was prior to 2017. So that's a comparison between 2017 and the 2019 versions. You say Lancashire Police may have noted that the proposed legislation by the government to exonerate all postmasters prosecuted by the Post Office acknowledges in the explanatory notes, and you quote from the government's explanatory notes, and it says there, the department is not aware of any cases prosecuted by CPS or Post Office Limited involving the HNGA system, and therefore has concluded that there is no reasonable case to extend the period, and this is in terms of exoneration, beyond the conclusion of the use of the previous versions of Horizon. Further down the page, you then address the Hamilton case, and you say, in Hamilton, the Court of Appeal Criminal Division defined a case as a Horizon case where the reliability of Horizon data was essential to the prosecution, in that there was no independent or corroborative evidence of an actual loss from the branch account, as opposed to a shortfall where Horizon evidence formed part of the evidence of the shortfall or corroborated other evidence. Over the page, please. You say, it is important to note that the Horizon scandal relates specifically to the Post Office's prosecutions of postmasters for shortfalls in their branch accounts, where the only evidence to prove the loss was a reliance on data from the Horizon system. Is that accurate, do you think?
That was the information provided to me by the in-house lawyer.
And the next paragraph says the decision to NFA the investigation appears to be based on the public perception of the scandal and the versions of Horizon in use at the time of the scandal. It's not clear whether the CPS EIA have considered the written judgments of the Horizon scandal when assessing the undermining issues in the case outweigh the realistic prospect of conviction. It says, further, the Court of Appeal Criminal Division have reviewed many appeals of convictions and have made clear that the safety of those convictions, even though the evidence relied upon was taken from versions of Horizon that were being subject of the Horizon issues judgment, are not unsafe where there is other evidence of the offence being committed or where the Horizon data was used to corroborate other evidence. Over the page, please, and it's a passage on the next page that I'd like to focus on. If we scroll down, thank you, it's that passage there. If the defence were to challenge the reliability of Horizon data, which the Post Office accepts is highly likely, the prosecution would be entitled to rely upon the findings of Mr. Justice Fraser and the Court of Appeal Criminal Division as set out above. Is that accurate?
That information, that section was provided by the in-house lawyer.
And looking at it as somebody who, for example, has a graduate diploma in law, do you consider that passage, which was in a letter which you signed, do you consider that to be accurate?
So it would certainly be useful to a prosecutor to be able to draw on that judgment in discussions with defence, which I think is the point that the lawyer is trying to make. I don't think he's suggesting it's evidence. I think he's suggesting that it's useful in order that it's just not dismissed out of hand. That was the purpose of this letter.
But don't the police and the CPS have to reach a certain evidential threshold?
Yes, they do. This doesn't question that. It's just saying, please apply an evidential threshold. Don't dismiss it out of hand before.
Is a fair reading of that paragraph not that you can rely on those findings, those judgments, to satisfy the evidential criteria?
No, it's saying, please don't dismiss this out of hand, and you could use that judgment in conversation with any defence should it progress that far. I think that's what he meant by this.
Do you think that is both fair and accurate?
I think it's fair that this particular case is not dismissed before an evidential test can take place.
If we could please turn back to your statement and the annex, that's WITN 1190200. WITN 111902000. Thank you. Page 105 is where the table begins. We've already looked at page 118. If we could zoom out, please. Bottom of page 118 was where the Lancashire police case can be found. The wording there in the second from right column is police requested statement regarding robustness of Horizon, Post Office producing a statement and also referred police to Fujitsu. If we scroll down please to page 121, there is a City of London police case, again same form of words in that second from right column. Police requested statement regarding robustness of Horizon, Post Office producing a statement, and also referred police to Fujitsu. Page 125. There's a section there addressing Gloucestershire Police, and again, the same form of words in that column. Police requested, etc. If we scroll down, please. Page 126, West Yorkshire case, again, same form of words. Page 127, West Midlands case, again, same form of words. Putting the case, the Lancashire case to one side, has there been any case where the Post Office has produced such a statement for the police in respect of the robustness of Horizon?
No.
Is it the intention for the Post Office to produce a statement addressing the robustness of Horizon?
Yeah, so it will be, it's been produced, we have a draft, it's been produced by Simon Oldnell, but in conversations with Simon Oldnell, he was very conscious that he was preparing a very similar witness statement for the inquiry and wanted to do this first.
There is a draft version of that statement. Is that something that can be shared with the inquiry?
Absolutely.
Could we please turn to FUJ 002431999? Is it your view that that statement will get over the hurdle in respect of the police's ability to rely on Horizon data?
Not entirely, no. I think it will demonstrate the control environment which surrounds Horizon data within Post Office, which falls under Simon Oldnell's remit. That's sort of a broad statement saying what that environment is. The reason we're referring forces to Fujitsu is that that is the best golden source of evidence for them on the transaction-by-transaction basis, because no transfer of data has occurred. That is the golden copy. So for them to, so if we can describe what controls we have in place to ensure that we know if transactions are not accurate, and if Fujitsu can provide a transaction-by-transaction analysis, then we deal with those two demands that they have asked for. or not if the evidence doesn't support it.
Let's look at some of the Fujitsu correspondence. We've looked at it in great detail already in this inquiry, but I'll just look at some of that correspondence. Here we have the letter to Nick Reed from Mr. Patterson of the 17th of May of this year. He says, I'm writing to you directly in order to raise serious concerns that have come to my attention, which indicate that the Post Office continues to pursue enforcement action against postmasters, and it expects Fujitsu to support such actions. To be clear, Fujitsu will not support the Post Office to act against postmasters. We will not provide support for any enforcement actions taken by the Post Office against postmasters, whether civil or criminal, for alleged shortfalls, fraud, or false accounting. In particular, criminal investigations. We've become aware of a recent investigation by the City of London Police, and I think that's the correspondence that
Yes.
we've been looking at. The approach of Fujitsu is to cooperate with the police and any other third party exercising independent investigative, prosecutorial, regulatory, or judicial powers. However, we are concerned by the behaviour of the Post Office investigation team on this matter. That team maintains an approach of Post Office as victim and requires Fujitsu to provide a witness statement as to the reliability of Horizon data, stating that without such statement, the case will not progress. For the investigation team to act in this matter seems to disregard the serious criticism raised in multiple judicial findings and indeed exhibits a lack of respect to the ongoing inquiry. What's your view of what is said in this letter?
So it is not Post Office seeking to pursue a criminal prosecution. It's the police. It's not Post Office. We were not looking to pursue any civil outcome or anything like that. In relation to their concern over the use of the word victim, if criminal conduct causes harm to the Post Office, that would make us, in common use of the word and in the use within law enforcement, as status of victim or complainant. And that's what that, in this case, we could be.
I think we've seen later correspondence from Mr. Reed that suggests that that won't be used in correspondence between yourselves and Fujitsu.
Yeah, I think it might have been Owen Woodley, but yes, in summary, yes.
Were you party to this correspondence? Was it discussed with you at the time?
No.
When was the first time that you saw this correspondence?
I'm not sure.
Is it in your preparation for the inquiry?
No, I did see it before the inquiry.
We're now in October. This is during the summer, June, July. Can you assist us approximately with when you first saw this correspondence?
I think I probably saw the first letter after the response went out.
But you weren't consulted as part of the response? No. Would you have been expected to have been consulted as part of the response?
Yes, potentially.
I'm going to stick to the timeline, so I'll come away from that Fujitsu correspondence. We're still going in date order. Could we please turn to poll 00448345? And this is June of this year, 26th of June, a paper, a report for the senior executive group written by yourself. SEG approval is sought regarding the proposed change in process in governing the passing of information to law enforcement to assist them in criminal investigations and any subsequent prosecutions prior to this matter being discussed at board in July 2024. Executive summary. The current group investigations policy, the CLEP, and the old policies are considered too unwieldy and unnecessarily complex. So this is addressing the change that we saw at the beginning of today to the new policy. If we could scroll down, please. It says the old policies have been consolidated into a draft single investigation and cooperation with law enforcement policy. The new policy, amongst other investigative operational policy changes, proposes a streamlining of the governance of providing law enforcement with information, the Director of ANCI and the in-house Criminal Counsel would have to agree to provide the information, and depending on the age of the information, a caveat would also be provided. This is the change that I think we discussed before the break, and we saw the board's discussion.
Yes.
So this is where you wanted to streamline the process and effectively for it to be delegated down to yourself to make the decision.
In conjunction with a lawyer.
Yes. If we scroll over the page, we can see the discussion of the caveat that was to be applied. So it says there are currently 22 police forces requesting or awaiting horizon-based evidence across 33 police investigations. To provide this information, your team will need to draw on horizon data and often provide transaction analysis. The current approach is that the board will need to be approached in the majority of these matters as and when the data is able to be shared. A draft policy is attached. It says, in particular, the draft proposes a change in the governance of passing material to law enforcement, which we believe is risk balanced. And then it says, the below is extracted from the draft. There's a section there that says, it is policy that any information originating from Horizon after the 1st of January 2022 may be passed as either intelligence or evidence to law enforcement agencies only after yourself or your nominated deputy and an in-house criminal lawyer both give approval. A record of their rationale and decision must be recorded. Where information is requested by law enforcement agencies that is Horizon data originating from pre the 1st of January 2022, the same process must be followed. In addition, there's additional wording that should be applied, and we'll have a look at what that additional wording is. If we scroll down, it says best evidence originating from Horizon sits with Fujitsu, and so law enforcement agencies should be encouraged to request this material direct from Fujitsu. And if we scroll down, it then has the accompanying lines that would apply to the pre-HN, the new version of Horizon, HNGA.
No, pre-2022.
And why do you draw that line?
So from that date onwards, there are factors that I think gives us more comfort in the absence of anyone raising substantial concerns with Horizon, the HNGA, which is the work that Simon Oldnall described in terms of external bodies reviewing bugs, errors, removing them, and that sort of thing. There's also the process that the retail team goes through that I've described earlier in terms of checking the reliability at that branch for those transactions at the relevant time. And then also almost from that time, my team was in place, and we can bring that objectivity, but also that assurance to what happens in the retail team. So based on those three control factors, we think that we should, absent something saying that the whole system is unreliable, that we should be able to handle that evidence without board having to give us permission.
And the caveat that is attached to the earlier material being provided would be as follows. From the 31st of December 2019, all post offices have worked on a version of Horizon that the High Court case of Bates and others has been considered by the High Court to be relatively robust. In 2020, Horizon was tested for the known errors and bugs identified in the Horizon Issues judgment and found not to be prevalent. During 2021, a process was developed to work collegiately with postmasters to understand the causes, any shortfalls. Any Horizon data that predates January 2022 cannot be shown to have benefited from all three of those checks and balances.
Yes.
Are these caveats and these form of words to be included in a letter, in a statement, or something else?
I think we'd probably put it in an email in the first instance, or a letter. In reality, we are unlikely to pass any material that predates 2022 to the police as evidence anyway.
Paragraph 7 says there are significant differences between the environment that existed at the time the old policies were formed and the current and future environment. The current approach to dispute resolution and the underlying technology could be seen as supporting a more business-as-usual approach to passing information to law enforcement. However, the most significant difference between 2019, when the old policies were first drafted, and now is that ACNI exists and brings significant criminal investigation experience to bear, but more importantly, also considerably more objective rigour to assessing evidence. Project Panther within ANCI is solely focused on testing the reliability of data that the Post Office investigators and law enforcement will rely upon. Can you briefly tell us what Project Panther is?
This is our catch-all project name for us testing the rigour or reliability of evidence that we rely upon in our investigations or would provide to law enforcement. And the genesis of that was that we came to realise that extraction tools were being used to data mine from Horace, I believe. But anyway, data that was used in the retail space. And we wanted to ensure that those mining tools were not going to change data in the course of their extraction. So we worked with Simon Oldnall's team to test the validity of those tools. And where we came to, in particular, was that the retail team use those as identifiers of something to them to look at, tripwires in effect. But any conversation with postmasters or any data that they rely upon in resolving an issue with postmasters comes from an original source, not through those tools.
Thank you. Could we please turn to the discussion of this issue at the group executive? That's poll 00448310. It's a meeting of the 26th of June. Could we please turn to page 7? It's about 3/4 of the way down page 7. Disclosure to support police investigations, Sarah Gray / John Bartlett. Did you attend this meeting?
Yes.
Tabled and noted was the paper on disclosure to support police investigations / passing of material to law enforcement. The SEG declined to approve the submission of the paper on disclosure support for police investigations to the board, noting further work and assurance was required in relation to Horizon data assurance. Can you assist us with that, please?
Yes, I think succinctly, they're awaiting Simon Oldnall's witness statement.
Is there a difference between you and the executive as to quite how reliable the Horizon data currently is?
No, I don't think so. And the reason I say that is if they genuinely thought that the material produced, that the Horizon data was flawed to the extent that we shouldn't share it with law enforcement, they should do something about it.
Could we please turn to FUJ 00243204? We're continuing chronologically, but we're now back to the Fujitsu correspondence. Okay. We're looking at correspondence of the 8th of July from Fujitsu. You'll have seen this, we've read it a number of times, that the 4th paragraph is effectively a criticism of the letter, the email that you sent. It then says, as the Post Office is well aware, there have been and there continue to be bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon system. Further, Fujitsu currently has and previously had access to branch transaction records. Your letter also acknowledges the existence of other matters beyond the Horizon system which could have operated to create innocent discrepancies in branch accounts, including miskeys or omissions, etc. In addition to Fujitsu, the Horizon system is reliant on the delivery of services by Post Office and third parties retained by Post Office. What's your view of what is said here?
They're saying that sometimes there are bugs, errors, and defects in the system.
Yes. I mean, you're obtaining the statement from Mr. Oldmore. Looking at this, do you think that what you're asking of Fujitsu is achievable?
Achievable in the sense that could they produce a witness statement? Yes, because what that witness statement would need to cover is a little bit like ours in terms of what the control environment is to protect and assure that data, but specifically what the police need is at that branch, at the relevant period, the relevant transactions, was there anything that would make that data unreliable? That's the witness statement that the police need.
But the kinds of concerns that are being raised here, continued bugs, errors and defects, access to branch transaction records, external service providers, won't all of those issues also have to be raised in a witness statement?
Yes.
And in light of that, is it likely, possible that there will be a successful conviction based on that, in your view?
It would depend on what the reliability of the data is on that particular matter. Because obviously if it comes back as, oh, there was a bug error or defect or a power outage or something like that that affected the reliability of the specific transactions that the police are interested in, then no, that shouldn't go forward.
And who's going to be able to work that out? Who's going to do the investigation as to whether there was a bug error or defect that did in fact impact on a particular branch on a particular day?
The police are asking Fujitsu to provide that information. On this particular case as well, I'm aware that once City of London Police have or had received this information to the transaction level basis, but also the control environment, they were discussing with us having an NCA approved expert witness then look at the system, but they wanted to look at the transactional data first. And the same with Lancashire Police.
So is there a plan to have an external NCA witness, expert witness, who can provide evidence on the reliability of Horizon data?
That was City of London's police intent that they told us.
And you say was. When was that communicated and how likely is that to happen?
It was prior to these letters. I haven't spoken to City of London since, so I don't know what their current intent is.
Could we please turn to FUJ 00243303? This is a letter from Fujitsu to the City of London Police on the 23rd of August of this year. This letter is in your witness pack. Is it a letter that before this inquiry you were aware of at all?
I don't think I saw this till last night.
Is it something that has been discussed with you by Fujitsu at all?
No. Which isn't surprising because I think this letter they say please don't share with any other party.
Thank you. It's to the investigator, fraud operations, economic crime directorate. Is that an individual who you've been dealing with?
I think I've spoken with her once.
If we scroll down, Fujitsu say as follows. As I understand it, the investigation is using data from the Horizon system. During our discussions, the City of London Police asked whether Fujitsu could provide a statement regarding the reliability of the current version of Horizon. As I hope was made clear in our discussions, a witness statement from Fujitsu attesting to the reliability or robustness of the Horizon system and of data from it would amount to expert opinion evidence. Fujitsu is unable to provide expert opinion evidence in any legal proceedings in relation to the Horizon system and the reliability of its operation, as it is neither independent nor does it have sufficient information to provide such an opinion at this time. Such a request has to be considered in light of the inquiry. Scrolling down, there's a section there on existence of bugs, errors and defects and remote access powers. And Fujitsu say, as discussed, the Horizon system has had and continues to have bugs, errors and defects, some of which may not have been detected at this time. So there's the possibility of unknown errors. Accordingly, careful investigation is required to ascertain whether bugs, errors or defects could have operated to cause the accounting discrepancies or transactions under investigation. Further, Fujitsu notes that evidence in the inquiry has identified a number of additional post office and third-party systems and business processes beyond the Fujitsu software, which also could or did introduce shortfalls in branch accounts. That's similar to the letter that we just looked at, isn't it?
Yes.
Over the page, please. It says, in general terms, remote access is the ability to access the Horizon system from a location other than a counter at the branch. And it sets out their remote access powers. Remote access powers enabling Fujitsu to assess and to amend data affecting branch accounts have existed and continue to exist within the Horizon system. The use of such powers would need to be examined to ascertain if they could potentially have caused or affected the accounting discrepancies or transactions under investigation. B, systems and processes to be investigated. It should be noted that the delivery of the current Horizon system is reliant on the provision of services by post office as well as third parties. And then it sets out there further complications in respect of third parties. C, Fujitsu's provision of records for police investigations. It says, based on the evidence which has been seen and heard in the inquiry to date, Fujitsu considers that all of the matters mentioned above would need to be carefully investigated on a case-by-case basis with the assistance of an independent IT expert and possibly also a forensic accounting expert to determine as best they can the cause of branch account discrepancies or transactions under investigation. Fujitsu considers that only after such investigation has been undertaken could a meaningful statement be made by an appropriate independent IT expert regarding the reliability of the Horizon system and the data it has produced at the relevant branch in the relevant time frame. Fujitsu is, of course, prepared to cooperate with the police and the criminal courts in the ways that it can. We have discussed that Fujitsu retains various Horizon system records which may facilitate your ongoing investigations. I said that I would work with the team within Fujitsu currently supporting the Horizon system in order to produce a list of those records. This exercise has proven more complex than I anticipated, etc. And the letter does actually enclose as an appendix a large amount of information, and we'll scroll through that shortly, that is being provided to the police in respect of their overall systems and repositories, etc. If we scroll down, please, to F, the letter says, production order to the extent that the records described in this letter and its appendices may assist the City of London Police's investigation, Fujitsu suggests that the City of London Police provides a production order to ensure that the City of London Police receives the data required within an achievable time frame. Fujitsu would appreciate the opportunity to review and comment on it. But they also say that in the meantime, in the interest of transparency and to assist the City of London Police's understanding of the content of this letter and its appendices, Fujitsu is prepared to provide the documents footnoted in that letter on a voluntary basis and in an unredacted form. And perhaps we could just quickly scroll through the appendix. That can be found at FUJ 00243304. FUJ 00243304. Thank you. And we can quickly scroll through various potentially relevant records generated by the Horizon system are being identified for the police. What is your view of this letter and its contents?
The issue around expert witness was raised in one of their previous letters that I had seen before. I don't agree. Post Office doesn't agree that it's expert witness, that they're actually a witness of fact, because what they would be being asked to provide is evidence of particular transactions at particular times, and that's it, together with a description of their control framework, is what I understand that the police would like. So the legal advice we've been provided, which I agree with, is that that is not an expert witness statement. In terms of the material that they've pointed out, great. That might assist City of London Police. Fully understand why they would like a production order. Again, don't have an issue with that.
As a former police officer, what would you have made of this in respect of an ordinary theft case? So let's talk of, let's say, £100,000 discrepancy has been identified, and you're presented with the keys to the warehouse, effectively, but no statement. What would you have made of that?
Well, the production order provides you the material. So you can look through the material and then engage with the witness, because that's what they are, and agree what would go in a witness statement to produce the evidence that the production order prompted. So that would be the next stage.
And do you feel that the police will be sufficiently resourced, sufficiently interested to actually pursue those kind of, what I would call it, what might maybe called it just an ordinary criminal case?
This particular case?
Any case that the Post Office considers sufficiently serious to pass to the police?
So City London Police consider themselves to be a strategic police force when it comes to fraud in particular. They are also the lead force for fraud in England and Wales. And when I spoke to who was their assistant commissioner, he's now, I believe, the interim chief commissioner, sorry. He saw the strategic nature of us being able to pass cases to them. So although I think this is about 300 something thousand pounds, actually, I think that value is significant, but I think they would realise that this is potentially a test case.
But going forward, in terms of relatively routine police prosecutions of cases where there are discrepancies, and in the Post Office view, that has been dishonestly obtained, do you think, realistically, looking at, for example, the letter that points to various bugs, errors and defects, it also points out that there are third-party suppliers to Horizon, it points out issues of remote access. Do you think, realistically, that's going to lead to successful prosecutions?
So I think one of the outcomes of the scandal is that for all cases, irrespective of whether they're Post Office derived, linked or otherwise, I think law enforcement are going to have to do those verification exercises, assurance exercises on digital data, because I think the scandal has shown that the assumption made that systems could be relied upon has changed. I remember when I first joined the police, there was no natural assumption that a computer system was functioning and workable, and we had to do what we called system statements. And I think an outcome of the scandal is that that's where law enforcement will end up going back to. So I don't think it will be particular to us.
Looking at further issues relating to the Horizon system, if we could just bring up onto screen our expert report, EXPG 607. We've seen there, it's page 19 of that report, by way of example, identifies current issues experienced by postmasters. Are these results something that was surprising to you or not?
I didn't really have a frame of reference to compare them to, if I'm honest.
But if, for example, we say that 70% have experienced screen freezes, 68% loss of connection, 57% have experienced unexplained discrepancies in the last 12 months. Does that cause you any concern at all?
Of respondents,
Yes.
not 70% of postmasters. Okay.
So, sorry, was that an answer or was that a question?
No, sorry, that was probably, should have kept that in my head. I don't know because I don't have a frame of reference.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because I don't know the frequency, because this activity, the visibility of these events would, if they are reported to post office, be within the retail team, and I wouldn't see that.
But isn't that something you should be on top of if you're investigating?
So on a case-by-case basis, they would be looked at.
I don't understand what case-by-case basis means. If we scroll down...
So, well, I can...
I will. Let's just have a look at what it says here, and then perhaps you can explain in that context. It says, among those who have experienced an issue in the last 12 months, about 2 in 3 say that they have experienced these issues on a monthly basis. So we have there 65% experiencing issues on a monthly basis. If we scroll down, it says this equates to about 3 in 5, 59% of all sub-postmasters surveyed. Should you in your position not have a view on the everyday experience of postmasters, irrespective of the specific case?
Yes.
And does that cause you any concern in respect of matters going forward and the prosecution of sub-postmasters?
So I think that this underlines the requirement to take each case that we take into my team, that we do absolutely nail down that we're satisfied or not, that whether or not the accuracy of the data is an issue that should rule out or rule in that investigation.
And how are you going to determine the accuracy of the data?
So that's the process that we've previously described.
And will that involve close liaison with Fujitsu?
Yes, if we're reporting a case to law enforcement, if they're willing to talk to us, or it will be close liaison with the police to help them understand the environment.
Could we please turn to FUJ 00243299? I'm going to take you back to a document from December 2023. These are issues that were raised with the Post Office about the extension of the Horizon system. If we scroll down, we can see that Fujitsu raise a few issues. They say there are various challenges to the feasibility of the continued delivery of the Horizon system and associated services. Number one, it says, due to the age and consequent end of service life status of the underpinning Horizon infrastructure, there is an increasing risk of failure of the infrastructure that could result in adverse impact in the delivery of services to the public. Two, the technical complexity and risk associated with updating infrastructure at varying states of obsolescence and compatibility. And two, delivering new system requirements, including because of lessons learned and commitments to end users. These activities are increasingly risky and technically challenging. Over the page, please. In consequence, we strongly recommend that Post Office should continue to prioritise its objective of replacing Horizon and its associated services as early as it can. Fujitsu will continue to support and facilitate orderly transition to an alternative solution. Have you given thought to the impact of the ageing system on the reliability of the data and in respect of the evidence that you're going to have to give to the criminal courts?
So we look at the individual branch, the individual transactions, and we have to assure ourselves that there's nothing there that suggests that that data can't be relied upon. Whether it's a brand new computer system or not, that same test needs to be applied.
Stepping back, though, and looking at all that correspondence that we've just been looking at, you're going to have Horizon for a number of years still to come, possibly 2030, possibly onwards. Is your view onwards? You look like...
I think our chairman is committed to 2028, but maybe 2030. I think my eyebrows went up when you said perhaps beyond 2030.
a number of years, you will still have the Horizon system. We have those concerns that are raised by Fujitsu about the reliability of the current system. We have further concerns raised about the aging system. We have the inquiry's own survey of current sub-postmasters. Do you think it's realistic to expect any successful prosecutions based on Horizon data during that period?
It would depend on the evidence related to each of those cases.
But what is your view?
And do remember that I'm absolutely convinced that no police force will take forward to a prosecutor a case that solely relies on Horizon data, that there must be corroborative evidence, because no one rightly should seek to rely entirely on Horizon.
I think your evidence earlier in terms of the statistics, though, was that none of those cases had yet proceeded to a prosecution.
Correct.
Looking forward, do you think there will be imminently in the next year, next 2 years?
Well, I think if Lancashire in particular, because that's the one I'm probably a bit closer to, I think if they can satisfy themselves that the transactions that relate to their investigation are reliable, then I think that stands a good chance of going forward back to the CPS and that they may make a decision to proceed. Obviously, if the validation process that Lancashire carry out does not confirm that that data can be relied upon, then that's a different matter.
I'd like to move on to a different topic. I'll just address one short topic before we take our mid-afternoon break, and that is the investigation into Mr. Jacobs, the sub-postmaster non-executive director. And I'll look at a number of different complaints about your team. Could we start by looking at WITN 111-80101? That's page 5, please. The bottom of page 5, we have an email from Mr. Morley, the Senior Investigations Manager within your team, to Mr. Jacobs. He says, I'm employed by Post Office as Senior Investigations Manager, and I have reason to conduct an investigation into alleged discrepancies at post offices within the Universal Office Equipment Group. I would now like to arrange to interview you in connection with the alleged discrepancies, and to this end, please can you provide your availability? Reference there to an interview. Mr. Jacobs is a sub-postmaster. The investigation is into the Universal Office Equipment Group. Is that, or is that not, a proposal to interview a sub-postmaster?
No, it's to interview a NED, who happens to be a postmaster.
Is that such an easy distinction to make?
But the purpose of that investigation revolves centrally around Elliot's status as a NED. That's the purpose of the investigation.
But the suggestion in that email is that it's an investigation into alleged discrepancies at post offices within his post office.
Yes, because the existence or not of any discrepancies is central to the other elements, the principal elements of that investigation.
Was Mr. Jacobs suspected of having committed a crime?
No.
Did you have any view as to whether the, for example, build-up of discrepancies was dishonest or not?
No.
Could we scroll up, please? Mr. Jacobs says, as I explained to, that's Mr. Foat, I'll be happy to assist your inquiry. If we scroll up, we have Mr. Morley. He says, the interview will be conducted by myself and Mr. Bartlett, who is the head of the Post Office Investigation Branch. Please find attached a letter from John explaining in some detail the format of the interview and the areas you wish to cover. Could we please look at that letter? That's WITN 111-80102. So is it your evidence that this kind of investigation would never now take place in respect of a ordinary sub-postmaster?
If they weren't a NED, then it wouldn't be with us.
When you say with us, do you mean
Well, a shortfall discussion or shortfall remedy or investigation, however you want to characterise it, they take place all the time in the retail team. So that's why I didn't want to say it would never happen.
So, and I think we're, again, getting back to the discussion or the interview point. If a sub-postmaster, like the evidence that is presented in this letter, a £200,000 approximate shortfall, and the suggestion is that there was a lack of or stop in engagement with the relevant team, would the retail team interview that person or not interview that person?
I don't know. I think the past team, the postmaster support team, would be the ones that would interact with the postmaster.
How can you not answer whether they would interview them or not when you are providing the assurance for that very team?
So I accept your point from earlier today that we need to look at that.
This is your letter. It says, "My name is John Bartlett. I'm head of the Central Investigation Unit." You say, "Andrew has been investigating shortfalls at post office branches within the Universal Office Equipment Group and has invited you to a voluntary investigative meeting." What is a voluntary investigative meeting?
It's effectively an interview.
Again, are there issues within the department as to how to describe an interview?
No, there's issues within post office as to how much clarity we can use in our language. Victim was another one. Is another example of that, of fearfulness of using clear language that people would understand because it might attract an adverse comment.
The shortfall that is alleged, as I said, approximately £200,000 originally alleged. The allegation was that he had stopped engaging. And you say below that, "We would like to discuss with you this mounting shortfall, understand what you think caused them, and identify any reasons for not continuing to engage with the past team." Is it really your view that there was no suspicion of criminal activity at that stage?
None had been raised with us.
And let's say you had that discussion. You're having what's described as an investigative meeting. Halfway through, you form a view as to whether he is honest or dishonest. What do you do?
Well, if we feel he's honest, we carry on. If we feel that that we have formed a suspicion that an offence may have happened, we would stop.
And have you done that in cases?
We haven't needed to.
Is there guidance about when to stop, how to
Yes.
stop, what to say? Yes. If we scroll down, when you say yes, is that post office guidance?
It should be in the manual.
Conflicts of interest. If we scroll down, there are other allegations about conflicts of interest and directors' declarations. If we scroll down under conduct of meeting, we've seen there that it's not an under caution interview. And then there's discussion about audio recording, and we'll come to a discussion about that. If we go over the page, please, and scroll to the bottom, it says there, "Any decisions made based on this report or any resulting non-investigative actions falls outside the remit of the investigation team." Can you assist us with what's meant there?
Yes, that means our job as investigators is to collect information and evidence, and we pass it to decision makers.
Thank you. Could we please turn back to that email chain? So that's WITN 111-80101. And if we could start at the top of page 3, so bottom of page 3. We've seen in this correspondence a discussion between Mr. Jacobs and Mr. Morley about the provision of information. He says, to begin, can you supply the 44-page PDF statement in Excel format, broken down by branch, because it was quite difficult to understand. Scrolling down, please provide line detail, including the reason for each TC or BD, so that it can be properly reviewed. Additionally, the attached file can't be accessed. Please provide the relevant email address. If we scroll up, there is the response from Mr. Morley. He says, can I respectfully suggest that you address the rest of your requests below to the postmaster support team as per their letters, emails sent to you at the time of the occurrence by past in which they offered to work with you to understand the discrepancy. So he's provided the relevant email address, but in terms of the remaining request, it seems he has directed Mr. Jacobs to the past team. Do you think that that is appropriate?
So I think the reason that happened is that this was we chose to engage with Elliot and ask get him involved in the discussion, through an interview, engage with Elliot to understand his view of events early. So we had a sample of the 140-something emails that had been sent to Elliot by the past team. What was being suggested here was that they were all provided to Elliot, and the simplest, best format and routing would have been from them.
If you are investigating somebody and have a body of evidence and are making an allegation, would it not be more straightforward for you to be the team that provides that information?
I think technologically wise, it was more effective for it to come from the past team.
If we scroll up, please. The discussion continues between the two of them about the provision of information. And then, please, could we turn to WITN 111-80103, page 2. And this is where things reach by the 20th of March 2023. Mr. Jacobs says, I await your proper and fully disclosures and will then take the matter under advisement. In addition, you've provided a highlighted section of board minutes. Can you please specify the accusation being made for the avoidance of doubt and the evidence on which you are relying in this regard? If we scroll over, please. This is the response that we've already been through and you'll be familiar with, but I'll just read it out. Mr. Morley says, I do not intend to enter in pre-interview protected correspondence regarding advance disclosure, which I'm under no legal obligation to provide and is provided on this occasion out of courtesy in order that you can have a high-level understanding of the topics we wish to cover, which are set out in the letter from Mr. Bartlett. Further detail regarding the post office's concerns will be provided during the interview. Do you think that is appropriate?
Absolutely not.
I'm seeking in advance of the interview your agreement to the recording of the interview, and then he suggests in effect that if he doesn't agree to the recording of the interview, it would be wise to allow 6 hours for that interview. Do you think that is appropriate?
I think it's factual that it would be we were asking, in order so that people don't have to make highly detailed written notes, it would be, if he was willing, then we could have an audio recording made.
Would it really take 6 hours to interview, or is that more of a threat?
No, I don't think it was a threat.
Do you think it realistically, that interview would have taken 6 hours if it
Well, I think the interview as it stood was over 3 hours anyway.
So it would have doubled in length?
So it would have taken a lot more to make. I think that's perhaps over-egging it slightly, a cautious approximation.
And why is it your view that the first paragraph is not correct? Or not?
That is not the tone that I want our team to use. I've raised it with him, and he knows that that's not what we do.
He is your senior investigations manager. He's one of your more senior staff. We saw that diagram earlier on. What was his response?
He accepted that.
Are you aware that after the interview, the post office auditors attended Mr. Jacobs's premises?
I believe it's a week later, yes.
And what's your view of that? Of the approach that was taken?
I think for the resolution of the shortfall issue, a count of stock and cash needed to be done.
Do you think that you gave in your letter sufficient information to Mr. Jacobs as to whether he was in any way suspected of something criminal, or what kind of an interview it was?
Yes.
Could we turn, please, to WITN 111-80104? That correspondence we were just looking at is in March 2023. We now get to February 2024, so almost a year later, where we have a letter from yourself to Mr. Jacobs saying, as you're aware, Assurance and Complex investigation team conducted a fact-finding investigation with your assistance, and essentially the matter was closed. Do you think that that is a reasonable time in which to give Mr. Jacobs a final closure on his investigation?
No, I don't, but I can explain why I don't.
Please do.
So it isn't right that it took that long, but if you look at the date, and I'm afraid I can't recall it, that we submitted the two investigation reports, the final investigation report, and by the time Mel Park submitted her report, they then sat with the chairman and the CEO for a very, very long time. We had no explanation provided to us as to what they were doing with the investigation reports, despite us chasing, and we couldn't issue a closure letter until we knew what the outcome was.
And where do you say responsibility lies? Who with?
I would say the former chairman and Nick Reed.
That's Mr. Staunton.
Yes.
And Nick Reed. Do you have any targets, completion targets in
No.
your team? Do you think it might be appropriate to have some sort of target as to when people are notified of the closure of investigations?
So I think it's reasonable to have a completion of investigation target, but where the output of that investigation goes is out of our control, then that would be a false target that we wouldn't be able to keep to because we have no control over it.
Thank you. So that might be an appropriate moment to take our mid-afternoon break.
Yeah, yes, certainly. But can I just ask one or two process questions about the horizon reliability issue, which you've examined at significant and proper length, if I may say so. But I just want to understand one or two things while they're fresh in my mind. All right. Mr. Bartlett, the first thing is this. This is me just dotting the I's. I take it that the City of London police investigation, which is the subject of correspondence between Fujitsu and the post office, is the City of London case mentioned in your schedule.
Yes, sir.
So that case was referred to the police in October 2022, according to your schedule. Yeah?
If that's on the schedule, sir, yes.
I think I've got it right, yeah. The Lancashire one was the 14th of September 2022, and I believe the City of London Police came shortly afterwards. But in any event, that case has been ongoing in the sense of being alive now for approximately 2 years, if I'm right in my reading of your schedule. Yeah?
That appears to be the case, sir.
And it got to the point in 2024, earlier this year, where, if not expressly, the indication was that the City of London Police weren't going to take it any further without a lot more information. Is that a fair summary?
Without a lot more information and evidence, yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. So you have resolved, i.e. Post Office, and I'm choosing my words reasonably carefully, so I'll start again. Is it correct that Post Office Limited has resolved to provide a witness statement to the City of London Police about this case? Or is it a case that events have been put in hand for Mr. Allnall to make a statement, but a decision as to whether to submit it to the police has yet to be made.
So a draft witness statement from Mr. Oldnall has been produced. It
Yeah.
needs to be finalised, which he wanted to do after giving evidence here.
Yeah.
And then SEG, so the Strategic Executive Group, and no doubt Board would like to consider that witness statement because of its significance.
That's what I wanted to flesh out. Where you say, and I appreciate this is just the summary, where you say in your appendix that police have requested a statement regarding robustness of Horizon, Paul are producing a statement. What you actually mean, and I'm not saying this in a critical sense, is that certain employees of the post office have put in hand the making of a statement, but it is yet to be decided whether or not that will be submitted to the police.
That's correct, sir.
Fine. And can you give me some kind of timescale for that?
So Post Office is committed to provide, if authorised to, that witness statement to Lancashire Police by the end of next month.
So Lancashire first, and there is a time commitment with them.
Yes.
Right. But, right, the last question, and then we'll have our break. My impression from your evidence about seeking to establish the reliability of Horizon in each particular case is that although Post Office can go so far in providing evidence to establish reliability, it is also necessary that additional evidence is given either by Fujitsu and or by an independent expert. Is that your understanding?
I would say both are required, sir.
Both. So in order for there to be any prosecution in truth, because the 5 cases that we have outstanding saying that you are going to produce a statement according to the schedule, in order to bring an investigation to a sufficient point that it can be submitted to the prosecuting authorities, i.e. the CPS, if it's England and Wales, there would have to be witness statements and supporting exhibits from Post Office Limited, Fujitsu Services Limited, and then an appraisal by an independent expert.
Yes, sir.
Right, thank you very much. So we'll resume a bit later than you anticipated, Mr. Blake, yeah?
It makes it more of a round number, sir, actually. 1:45, please.
All right, fine.
Thank you. Moving on to Project Pineapple and Saf Ismail. Could we please bring up onto screen poll 004483002? This is the well-known Project Pineapple email on page 4 of that document. We could turn to page 4. If we scroll down slightly, Mr. Ismail says in the note of the discussion with Mr. Ismail and Mr. Jacobs, it says, equally, Saf and Elliott are fed up with the amount of power wielded by FOTE. He and other members of the senior team act as if PMs are guilty until proven innocent. No one believes us is a constant refrain from PMs. Whilst FOTE is at the helm, nothing will change. We must also part company with all those investigators who behave so terribly with postmasters. What on earth is happening if Steve Bradshaw is still with us? His performance at the inquiry is a disgrace and reflected terribly on Post Office. FOTE uses his leadership of the inquiry team as an instrument of his power. It all has to stop, and the postmaster is not the enemy. Only postmasters can solve this and tell us how to change. And here is the reference to yourself. JB is an ex-policeman. His behaviour has been unacceptable, and he needs to move on to prove we have changed. Were you aware of this at the time?
No.
When did you first become aware of this allegation?
It was raised to me by Ben FOTE once he received whatever he received, he mentioned that to me.
And what is your view of what is said there?
I don't know what they're alluding to.
Can I just ask, in terms of Mr. Foat, it's been suggested by at least one witness that Mr. Foat wasn't responsible for your team. Is that right or wrong? Because we saw the organogram and it looked as though Mr. Foat was at that particular time responsible.
Sarah Gray reported into him and I reported into Sarah Gray.
So insofar as it addresses his responsibility, that is correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you. We've spoken about the various policies and the changes in the group policy. Has that had input from sub-postmasters?
The combined
Yes.
one has had input from the Postmaster Experience Director.
Has it had, for example, input from the NFSP or the Voice of the Postmaster? Have they been invited to make any comment?
So we have talked to the NFSP primarily around Speak Up, but obviously connected to Speak Up are investigations from that. And in terms of how we conduct investigations, the Speak Up manager meets with the NFSP every week where they talk about investigations. I've attended those meetings on occasion, and we've talked about our approach to investigations, and the feedback we've received is that it's supportive of our approach. And to the extent, sorry to follow that up, to the extent that we have had cases referred to us by the NFSP for us to deal with.
But in terms of the policy that is not yet finalised, is there any plan for any more involvement of sub-postmasters, whether it be via the NFSP, via the non-executive directors or some other?
Yes, so the NFSP, we would like to have look at it and provide an input.
Could we please turn to poll 004467006? Now, this is a feedback from an anonymous survey at the post office. It's not an inquiry-led survey, it's from the post office. And I'm going to just take you to two lines from it and ask your view. The first is 1461, and it says teams could work better with each other, such as A and CI, as they do not take on feedback and assume their way of working is correct without having the knowledge to back it up, so come across as non-transparent and belittling. And then 1494 says, overall, there is great teamwork and cooperation between departments. However, the A&CI team can at times come across as aggressive, refuse to accept feedback, and can work in isolation, not understanding our ways of working / policies. Are those complaints that you recognise, not as per the individual who made them, but simply are they concerns that you are aware of?
No.
And what is your view of them?
It's a bit worrying if that's how... Was this from a colleague survey
Yes.
as opposed to a postmaster survey?
Yes, I believe so.
So if there are colleagues that feel this way, I'd like to understand why and see what we can do to change if we need to.
Prior to being shown that by the inquiry, had those concerns been drawn to your attention at all?
No.
Project May, you've provided a separate witness statement on. That can come down, thank you. And that's the project relating to the race identity codes.
Yes.
That was first commissioned on the 30th of May 2023. The final report was the 8th of February 2024. You've addressed it in your statement and the background. Am I right to summarise that those codes are likely to have originated from Royal Mail Group before the split?
Yes.
Has the Post Office established the actual origins of how the racist terminology came to be used?
As in an individual?
How it first became to be formulated within the Royal Mail Group?
What we know is that someone within the investigations section within Royal Mail Group created that document, but we don't know who.
An external company called Etica has been involved. Very briefly, what is their involvement?
They're a non-government organisation that are they support organisations like the International Criminal Court and human rights activities in terms of ethical investigation.
They reported, the report was produced on the 1st of March 2024. One of their recommendations was annual training on unconscious bias and also regular training to remain up to date with best practice. Mm-hmm. Again, is this an area of training that is not yet finalised?
So we're hoping this will form part of the provision from the College of Policing.
Thank you. So again, as we discussed earlier today,
it's imminent.
Imminent. There was originally going to be a part 2 of Project May. Very briefly, what was the plan for Project 2 and what has happened to it?
Yeah, so originally we hoped that an organisation like Etica would look at a large sample of historic investigations, so those that are pertinent to this inquiry, with a view of using various scientific and academic methods to review a large number of cases to see if they could determine whether there was any conscious or unconscious bias in decision making, particularly around the raising of cases, the decision to prosecute, or acceptance of payment via the contract enforcement.
And why has that not taken place?
I don't know.
Who is responsible for deciding whether it takes place or not?
Nick Reed made a decision to change phase 2.
And what did he change it to?
So it's now, it looks like it's going to be the establishment of a focus or consultative group within Post Office as to the use of language and approaches that take into account difference from an EDI perspective in relation to investigations.
So is it now forward-looking rather than backward-looking?
Absolutely.
At paragraph 20 of your statement, you've said that your team has purposely removed fields which would capture demographic data on the case management system. Might that cause issues with not actually being now able to monitor, for example, disproportionate impact or disproportionate numbers of investigations into certain ethnic groups?
Potentially, but the more prominent issue is that it's not felt that we're required to collate that data. But I take your point. I think it's a trade-off between people not being comfortable with their ethnicity being recorded, but the value to an organisation in capturing that data.
Yes, I mean, are you aware, for example, that the inquiry sought sub-postmaster demographic information in advance of its survey, but in fact the Post Office doesn't hold that kind of data in respect of the sub-postmaster population?
No, I wasn't aware.
There's been some evidence in previous phases of, for example, relating to the help desk, where negative assumptions were made about certain ethnic groups. How does that failure to collect that kind of data impact on your ability to monitor those kinds of things?
We have a very small caseload, so we will know who's connected to that caseload, so we could recreate that if needed. But within Post Office in relation to Project May, there was a very strong upsurge of opinion that the collation of ethnic data was an issue.
Moving on to Project Phoenix, could we please turn to poll 00448-649? These are the board minutes of the 29th of April 2024. I'm only taking you to that because it provides a helpful summary of where things were at by this stage. It's page 2. And the second paragraph there, the bottom of the second paragraph, sets out various categories of investigations. Current roles is not part of your remit, is it?
No.
In terms of Project Phoenix, it says the third category included and expanded on the scope of Project Phoenix and to focus on addressing any misconduct allegations arising against current employees as a result of evidence given at the inquiry in later phases, in addition to the evidence provided at the human impact hearings. Are you aware of this, when Project Phoenix was first established? Was that related to the human impact hearings?
Directly.
And why is it that the Post Office, in your view, hadn't started looking into the conduct, the historic conduct of its employees before the human impact hearings?
I don't know for sure, but my impression, which I think I maybe mentioned this morning, is that that sort of understanding was expected to come out of the inquiry itself, but I think it demonstrated a lack of curiosity on behalf of the organisation to learn by itself.
In terms of that investigation, Phoenix, that's carried out by a team that's within your division.
Yes.
Was any thought given to whether an internal group of investigators was appropriate to be, for example, liaising directly with sub-postmasters?
So they're not internal in the sense that they were existing members of the team. They weren't. They're recruited specifically to do this, and they only do matters relating to the inquiry. So they don't do business as usual work.
Thanks. What's your view on the proposal that individuals should be suspended whilst they're being investigated in respect to Project Phoenix?
I think the appropriate policies have to be applied.
And what do you mean by that?
So there are policies, ER-owned policies, that have to be applied in terms of misconduct issues, and they've got to be applied.
There's been a thematic report that has been produced in respect to Project Phoenix. That can be found at poll 004580007. That was completed on the 28th of August of this year. It's poll 004580007. We'll skip through this relatively quickly because everybody has it and it can be considered in due course. Over the page, please, to page 2, there are a number of failings that were identified in this thematic report. Is that right?
Correct.
Can you broadly summarise the findings there?
So I think bullet point 3 identifies 5 key themes. So quality and application of investigations, of investigative activity is one, record keeping, the recruitment and training of investigators, separation of functions, so that's between those conducting criminal investigations and those that were conducting contract advising or contract resolution issues, and then there's themes around poor conduct of post office staff.
If we could turn to the conduct of post office staff, and that's on page 3, please. A number of issues were raised in terms of the investigation, in terms of compliance with legal obligations, etc. But I'm just going to focus on this particular section. It says a range of issues were raised in the human impact evidence and was the main driver for the initiation of Project Phoenix. Some allegations have been disproved with factual evidence obtained by the Phoenix team, but there have also been matters relating to current post office employees that have been referred for code of conduct investigations by the employee relations team that are currently ongoing. Matters of potential criminal nature have also been identified, and with panel approval and submission through the post office, cooperation with law enforcement policy have been passed to the Metropolitan Police Service for their consideration. Although the prosecution aspect of the reviewed cases was not covered by the terms of reference for Project Phoenix, there have been matters identified by the review team that have met with panel approval for referral to the Solicitors Regulation Authority and MPS. Are we to understand that Phoenix conducts its investigation, waits for that investigation to conclude, and then in cases, for example, that are employment matters, then passes it on to the employee relations team to conduct another investigation?
So I think some clarity over language is useful.
Yeah.
So the Project Phoenix team conduct reviews, not investigations. Again, I think that might be something we could talk about for some time, but the reason for saying review is that they don't reinvestigate the original allegations made against the postmasters or their staff. What they do is they review the material that is available and then make observations, findings, and recommendations. So they do that, they produce what is called a merits assessment, and then, which we have shared, all of them that we have completed through the panel so far with the inquiry. They then go to the panel, and there could be and they have been recommendations in there of the nature that you described there. And that's when employment policies would kick in at that point.
A review sounds perhaps quicker and more achievable than an investigation. Why has it taken so long?
The appalling state of post offices' data systems going back that far, it is, I think, well, if you've read any of the merits assessments, you'll see that the team that complete them put in there that there was an expectation that when they started, they would literally be handed a case file and related papers for them to review. That has absolutely not been the case. So there's 5.4 million documents that are potentially in play. And the way I try and explain it, because everyone asks, why has it taken so long? The way I explain it is, you should be able to go to a filing cabinet, find a file, take it out, whether that's electronic or physical. But the way I tried to describe it is, imagine a room with 5.4 million documents in, but they've just been thrown in there. There is no index, no description. You have to search through each of those documents to try and find it.
And are we now to expect that matters have been passed in certain cases to the employee relations team or the police, who are then, as you've only carried out a review, then going to have to investigate? And if so, what do you expect the timelines to be?
So I don't know about the police investigation, because obviously that's out of our control and we don't know what other evidence they have. But we actively cooperate with them and make referrals proactively to them where we have concerns. And then they take it from there. We're in the process of agreeing how we can pass them the material that's been collected so they don't have to repeat that process. And with the employment relations type, HR type investigations, at the moment we're trying to work out with the police how those two functions interact, and we will be guided by the police. In respect, the post office will be guided by the police.
Thank you. I'd just like to have updates on two other investigations. The first is Project Willow. Can you assist us briefly with where things stand with that?
So there are 3 Project Willows. Which one would you
Can you assist us with all of them as quickly as you can?
Okay, so Project Willow
Yes.
was an investigation to test whether someone who believed that they were a PIDA qualifying whistleblower had received detriment. So that's that investigation, that's closed. Willow 2 is an investigation in relation to MBIT. And there are 2 particular themes in there. One is that senior decision makers, so CEO and SEG, were provided with selective information in order to make decisions. That is currently open and is being investigated externally, by an external organisation, one of the law firms and accountancy firms. The second part of that is that, I think you mentioned it to Chris Brocklesby, which is that the information security elements, some of relating to the MBIT build, were deliberately deactivated. In order
what is
to
the status of that?
So that is also being dealt with by the same investigation team externally. Project Willow 3 is a newer allegation, and that relates to whether a potential supplier that could assist with various elements of delivery of MBIT process was properly briefed to the board, or whether that was skewed, and that is underway.
Nearing completion or just underway?
That investigation had to be paused because of for speed purposes, we chose to use the same team to conduct the investigation around Saf Ismail that recently surfaced and that you are aware of. So that team has completed that investigation, and now they are back on Willow 3.
And finally, Project ACER. Can you give us an update as to, first of all, in very overview terms, what that is and where it's up to?
Sure. So that Project ACER is an allegation that came through the Speak Up service function that an individual within Post Office had instructed their team to destroy or otherwise remove material that might be of value to the inquiry. We told the inquiry about it, you informed the Met Police about it, is now a Met Police investigation.
Just for clarity's sake, it doesn't involve a witness in Phase 7?
No.
Thank you. So those are all of my questions. There are some questions from call participants. We have discussed orders and timings.
Well, I mean, let's be realistic. How many questioners are there?
There are 3. Mr. Steen proposes to be first and the longest, but he will be 10 minutes. And the other 2 questions are no more than 5 minutes each.
Right. Well, I'm going to make it easy for everyone by saying that it is now 4:10, and I propose to sit no later than 4:40. All right? So I'll allow a little latitude because I don't want to rush people, but I'm not going to sit beyond 4:40. So between the 3 of you, you'll have to work it out, as they say.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Steen.
Thank you, sir. I have my watch by me, which is, always a very reliable judge of my timings. The question I have for you, Mr. Bartlett, come from the direction of obviously a very large group of people that have been badly affected by the scandal. But the team I represent or the group of people I represent also includes current sub-postmasters. Do you understand? Now, you've been asked a number of questions by Mr. Blake about NBIT and what's happening.
Yes.
And you provided some more recent information. You addressed that in your statement. I don't need to go to it because I'm just referring to the fact that you're talking about NBIT. So for your purposes, it's within your statement, Mr. Bartlett. It is page 15, paragraph 25. And what you're saying there is that on 28th of June 23, the GE agreed that A and CI priorities for the financial years 23-24, 24-25 would be, then you give an order of priority. And then the fourth order of priority, therefore, at D, was preparing for transition of the network to new branch IT system, NBIT. Okay? And then slightly further down, you start to talk about the fact that work on NBIT is delayed because essentially the landscape is not sufficiently developed to require this work. All right, so we understand, and just hopefully you'll agree with me, that your work that was proposed for NBIT was put on hold pending more development, more information.
Correct.
Okay. Now, your statement, which contains those references, is dated the 22nd of August of this year. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, since that time, we've heard from Mr. Relton, the new chair of the Post Office, who I think towards the end of his evidence was talking about whether NBIT's really a very good idea or not, and was wondering whether, in fact, it was a poor idea. That's information that presumably you are aware of and heard.
No.
Okay. Well, in the magazine Computer Weekly, which has been an integral part of the background to the development of this scandal, they were a news organisation that were one of the principal organisations that actually broke the scandal in the press. Now, they've been setting out the fact that they have hold of information, internal Post Office document, from the new CEO, or the new acting CEO, Neil Brocklehurst, revealing that while the strategic review is ongoing and informed by other discussions with the board and stakeholders, we have taken the opportunity to review our current approach to our delivery of new technology to make sure it will deliver what postmasters need in the most effective way possible. Then goes on to say this: This means from next week we will start reassessing and reprioritising the NBIT programme. Now, is that a document that you're aware of, an internal Post Office document from the acting CEO, Neil Brocklehurst, saying essentially that NBIT the Post Office is going to start reassessing and reprioritising?
I'm aware that they're reassessing and reprioritising.
So the question of NBIT and what's going to happen with it does seem to be under fairly close examination within the Post Office. That seems to be where we're at.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem at all certain that it's likely to go ahead. Again, that seems to be where we're at. Do you agree?
I have heard those things, but I'm not closely associated to it because it's a technology process.
And you've discussed with Mr. Blake towards the end of the questions, he asked you Willows, I think it's Willows 2, 3 and 4, I wasn't certain. No. Willows 2 and 3.
2 and 3 relate to NBIT.
And you were talking about information that's being skewed. Now, can you help us? Who's doing the skewing?
That's the purpose of the investigation.
Right. Nobody's been identified as the skewer.
There have been allegations made, and the external investigators are seeking to corroborate or otherwise that.
And the person that's doing the skewing, is that an important person within the organisation?
Potentially, but there are also a number of people who have left the organisation that might also relate to.
Right. Are you able to provide the name of the person that's a suspect for the skewing?
That would depend on what the chair is.
What's the name of the person that's doing the skewing?
Mr. Sealer.
No, I don't think you need to answer that.
Right. Okay. Now, we have also some information. I'll change subjects because sounds like that's a developing situation, Mr. Bartlett. We also have a new statement from Mr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson is the European Director of Fujitsu. Okay? Mr. Patterson has given evidence in the inquiry and has provided a statement that, again, demonstrating things are moving on, that is dated the 23rd of September 2024. And he says this in relation to police requests. Fujitsu has informed the relevant police forces and POL that whilst Fujitsu is willing to cooperate with the investigations through the provision of documentary records, Fujitsu is not in a position to provide the witness statements requested. Fujitsu is of the view that such witness statements would amount to expert opinion evidence, which Fujitsu cannot provide on the basis that Fujitsu is not independent, brackets, amongst other reasons, close brackets. Fujitsu has made clear to POL that discussions regarding these investigations are confidential as between Fujitsu and relevant police forces. And then goes on to say, it became apparent to Fujitsu through the police requests that the views of POL and Fujitsu with respect to the use of Horizon data in enforcement action against postmasters and branch staff are fundamentally different. Okay?
Okay.
So if we trace through the questions that Mr. Blake was asking you earlier, from December of 2023, Fujitsu was describing the system as being obsolescent, old, patched up, constant needing for repairs. You've then seen other correspondents talking about the fact of current beds that they know about and others that they don't know about, yes?
Yes.
Right. And you've then heard from me, reading part of Mr. Patterson's statement, recently provided to this inquiry, and saying that Fujitsu, frankly, are not prepared to provide any statements to support the system. They're just not doing it, Mr. Bartlett.
Well, they've responded to a production order, or are intending to, and that will need to be followed up with a witness statement in order to produce that evidence. I would also challenge their assertion that they are an expert witness. Then, in my opinion, and legal advice that we've received, is they are not an expert witness.
I was going to come to that. Now, the position between Fujitsu and the Post Office does seem to be rather at odds. We've had now a whole series of correspondence, starting with December 23, right the way through to only a few days ago, essentially, saying that Fujitsu and the Post Office have very serious disagreement between their stance on these matters. That's at the very least
I think that's fair.
Yes, that's at the very least what we've got, okay? So it does seem as though that Fujitsu may have slightly different advice in relation to the provision of statements than you've got. Who's your advice been given by?
I don't know. It's external counsel, but I don't know the name of
Have you seen a written advice?
I've seen a summary of that written advice.
Right. So the position in relation to Fujitsu appears to be that they're not prepared to provide any expert evidence at all from their point of view in relation to the operation of the system. And it also seems to be they're saying the system's old, it's out of date, needs a lot of work, needs a lot of support, and there are bugs in the system. It doesn't seem as though they're particularly keen on saying there's no problems in the system, we'll provide a statement to say that it's okay. Doesn't seem that way, does it, Mr. Bartlett?
So that's what they are not being asked for. They're being asked around specific transactions.
Well, hang on, Mr. Bartlett. You said in your evidence that because Fujitsu haven't said that it's unreliable, we're therefore prepared to assume it is reliable.
Mm-hmm.
You've also said in your evidence that because the Pole Senior Executive and Directors Board haven't said it's unreliable, we will assume it's reliable. So you're working on the basis of two negative assumptions, aren't you, Mr. Bartlett?
And then the next step is that the police, to an evidential standard, test those transactions in the system.
Right. And we've now got evidence in relation to your statement of ongoing investigations. You described one as being some sort of test case that you're thinking about, yes?
I'm not sure.
Lancashire or City?
I think that's likely to be the first case.
Right. Okay. Now, we can see at the back of your statements a schedule that relates to those investigations, and indeed the individuals being investigated can identify their own cases, can't they? Because they've got the numbers, the figures for each case.
Yep.
Right. Have those investigation teams for each one of the police forces involved been given all of the correspondence that you've had questions asked by Mr. Blake about? Have they been given all of that correspondence?
So we've discussed with Lancashire some of that correspondence since those letters have come in, and we've made them aware of it, and they're still engaging with Fujitsu, as I understand. As the next cases come up, then we will talk to them about that too. We will make everything available to them, and we will share it as they would like.
That's Lancashire. City?
I haven't spoken to City for some time.
Given that in May, 17th of May 2024, Mr. Patterson was expressing very strong reservations about the use of data from Fujitsu in relation to investigation. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't that immediately provided to the police forces that were conducting these ongoing investigations?
The interpretation of the letters is that he wasn't saying the data was unreliable. He was saying he didn't want it to be used in a prosecution.
Well, in fact, it says, the 17th of May letter, that they don't believe it should be used at all in relation to prosecutions and pursuant of people in relation to prosecutions, civil actions or shortfalls generally. It's a pretty strong letter, Mr. Bartlett.
It is a strong
letter. You would have thought should go to a police investigation looking at these issues. Why didn't it go to those police investigations immediately?
Because it wasn't saying that there was an issue with the data. It's saying their intent, their preference, their desire, their position is that it's not used in those circumstances.
So it was considered for disclosure, was it,
Yes.
Mr. Bartlett? So you actually looked at it and said, should this go to police forces that are conducting investigations? And your decision or someone else's was, no, it shouldn't.
Well, we've subsequently had legal advice as well, which says it shouldn't.
Doesn't seem that the post office has changed very much, Mr. Bartlett.
Well,
if we
that's
analyse everything that you've
a little
said.
bit unfair, actually, because we've discussed those issues with those law enforcement teams as they've cropped up. We're not concealing anything at all.
Mr. Bartlett, overall, what we seem to have from your evidence is we seem to have a situation whereby you and your team are prepared to back the Horizon system with no evidence whatsoever that actually that the damn thing sorry, I shouldn't use that word, that the thing should actually be presented before any court or in relation to any shortfall. That's basically the situation, Mr. Bartlett, isn't it?
No.
Thank you.
So we have Miss Watt and Miss Allen.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bartlett. I ask questions on behalf of the NFSP.
Hello.
And you've been answering questions about the development of the post-Horizon scandal conduct of investigations throughout today, and also what seems to be the vexed issue of when is it an interview, a meeting or a discussion. And I just want to take a look at some of those issues regarding the cases of Elliot Jacobs and the other postmaster, non-executive director who underwent an investigation, Saf Ismail. You just mentioned that one, I think.
There is a current investigation. There is no previous investigation.
Did you see their evidence to the inquiry?
Some of it.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask you something about that. Saf Ismail says in his witness statement, I'm not calling these up, but just for the record, WITN 11170 at paragraph 221. Often postmasters will be suspended prior to interview without understanding the reasons for that suspension. Postmasters are still not shown evidence relating to investigation into their branches prior to investigation interviews being conducted by post office investigators. You've been taken to Mr. Jacobs' concerns. Mr. Blake took you to a series of documents this afternoon about the lack of information provided to him when he was notified of an investigation and invited to an interview. At paragraph 24 of his witness statement, WITN 1118000, he talks about his experience. I considered the interview to be an interrogation and adversarial. It was not a collaborative discussion. The interview was similar in style to a formal police interview, as the questions put to me were interrogatory and the documents were put to me as exhibits. Okay, so that's my summary. Just a couple of questions now. At paragraph 69B2 of your witness statement, that's your second witness statement, you talk about the policy Mr. Blake took you to it this morning. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I'll say GICLEP.
The new combined.
The new combined policy, yes. And that's Paul 00448353. And you describe the commitment to ethically executed, evidence-led, transparent investigations. Given the evidence of Mr. Ismail and Mr. Jacobs, in what way would you say the Post Office investigations met those standards?
So we've never dealt with Mr. Ismail.
You can refer just to Mr. Jacobs.
So
yes.
Mr. Jacobs. Well, I'm very pleased that the interview with Elliot Jacobs was recorded, because it can go on record to show what the nature of that interview was. It absolutely was not an interrogation. It was an early engagement with him to understand his position and for him to give explanations and for us to be open-minded as to what that may be. There was a subsequent, off the back of Project Pineapple, which people have heard about, the ER team conducted a review of the conduct of that Elliot Jacobs' investigation, and they found that his complaints were completely unfounded.
Would you agree, and I've just got one final question after this one, would you agree that how postmasters, whether NEDs or not, feel about the way they're dealt with is important?
Absolutely.
Would you not agree that the conduct of, for instance, that investigation, certainly the reporting of it, will simply reinforce to today's postmasters that not a great deal has actually changed? Some of the wording in your new combined policy has changed. Some of the deck chairs have been rearranged. But what's said about their recent experience, if that's anything to go by, there's still a long way to go to win back the trust of postmasters in the conduct of investigations.
There is a long way to go. But what I would say is if postmasters were to listen to the interview that we had with Elliot, I'm absolutely confident that they think that things are different compared to how they were done before. And also it might be helpful to add a couple of matters that were referred to us by the NFSP were dealt with very sensitively, and we received feedback from the NFSP to that effect. So I think it is different from the past.
Because the NFSP liaise with you on the way in which you are in fact conducting matters, is that not correct?
Yes, and in those particular cases, they brought them to us and we discussed with them our approach and what the outcome was, and they were happy with how that was conducted.
But we're not talking about Mr. Jacobs' case when you're talking about that?
Yeah, it's certainly not
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs, it's two other matters.
Yes, thank you.
Are you, sorry, just so I'm clear, Mr. Bartlett, are you saying that following the interview with Mr. Jacob, he made a complaint which was investigated and found to be unjustified?
Yes, sir.
Right, fine. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bartlett. My name is Christy Allen and I represent core participant Susan Sinclair, who was a wrongfully convicted sub-postmaster and the first to successfully appeal her conviction in Scotland. In your second witness statement at paragraph 69, which I don't propose to turn up, you describe the activity of the ACNI staff as a POL criminal investigation, but caveat this with the fact that it's not an end-to-end investigation and that it's for law enforcement agencies to conduct a full criminal investigation following a report from the Post Office of suspected criminality. Prior to May this year and during your tenure at the Post Office, I assume that you were aware that the Post Office was a specialist reporting agency in Scotland, meaning that it was entitled to carry out its own full criminal investigation into suspected criminal conduct and to report that the findings of that directly to the public prosecutor in Scotland without the requirement to have this first reported to the police.
Yes.
And I assume that you're also aware that in May of this year, the Lord Advocate, Scotland's most senior law officer, confirmed that the Post Office was no longer fit to continue in its role as a specialist reporting agency in Scotland due to its failure to comply with its duties of disclosure and candour.
Yes, we were consulted around that, and I contributed to a response back saying that we did not want to have that status anymore.
And if you can elaborate in what were the reasons that you provided for not wanting to have that status?
Because we're not a prosecuting agency, therefore we shouldn't have that right or ability to have that status.
And you mentioned earlier that there seemed to be an apparent reluctance by authorities in Scotland to adopt evidence collected by non-law enforcement agencies. Do you think that this, the stripping of Post Office's role as a specialist reporting agency has had a bearing on that?
I'm sure it has, but it's not limited to the Post Office. So in my previous role at a financial regulator, the Procurator Fiscal insisted that Police Scotland recreate an investigation that had already been completed by the regulator because they wanted Police Scotland to do it.
Okay, thank you. And has any official review work been undertaken by your team or within wider Post Office as a result of the decision by the Lord Advocate?
No, we supported it being removed.
Okay, thank you. I think that ends my questions there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So is that it, Mr. Blake?
That's it, sir, yes.
Right, very good. Well, I think everybody knows that tomorrow we are starting at 9 a.m. In part, at least, that is for my convenience because I have a personal appointment which I have to keep, which means that we won't be able to sit beyond 1 o'clock, all right? So I want everybody to know that tomorrow is, the sitting hours tomorrow are conditioned by that. It is also the case that Mr. Folt will be giving evidence remotely. I acceded to a request to that effect on the grounds of his health. And so I'm giving everyone warning that his evidence, save in the most exceptional circumstances, has to end tomorrow. So that means by around 1 o'clock, so that Mr. Blake and anyone who wishes to ask him questions should tailor their questioning with all that in mind. All right? With those remarks, I'll bid you good evening and see you in the morning.
Thank you very much, sir.